Hello and welcome back, Earthlings and friendly-minded extraterrestrials, to the second video of my breakdown to the Starfield gameplay reveal trailer. I'm the Geek and this is your place if you are looking for gaming and geek stuff from a queer perspective. If you haven't seen the first video I made to the Starfield gameplay reveal trailer, the link to it is in the description below, but the order in which you watch these videos isn't that important. In the last part, we explored what we can conclude from the trailer about character creation and the skill system. In this video, we will have a look into the gameplay that happens dirtside, read on planets, as Starfield will be divided rather strongly between space and surface gameplay, so there is no in between, either or, but we will have a look into it. The on-foot gameplay is something I think, have already the best idea on how it will work in comparison to the other mechanics and parts of Starfield. Bethesda has done that pretty well in the past games, so we probably won't see that big changes on that front. Besides an evolutionary progression of the system, we already know and love, with some adjustments and additions that are required for the setting of the game, of course. The screenshot with which I want to start with is from a point in the trailer that is more concerned with the factions and story gameplay and less with what we see of UI and such. But we see here with this watch we can see, we open the door to the headquarters of a faction, and that very much reminded me on how we used the Pip-Boy in Fallout 4 to open vault doors. And that got me thinking. This watch thing, besides circles being the reappearing design feature we see in Starfield, we will see this watch shape in the UI later on. So my theory is that this is just a very advanced Pip-Boy, in a sense. So all the things like the skill system, the inventory management, the selection of quests will be more or less something we see on our watch, which means we see the animation, the watch goes up, and then we have all these menus on the forefront. So very much like the Pip-Boy in the Fallout series. If so, it seems to me as a very organic progression from the mechanics used in Fallout 4 and is very much like other things we've seen so far in this trailer. Especially when we go from this screenshot to the first we have for the on-foot gameplay. Here on the left bottom we see an element that looks like the watch, which reminds me very much of diver's watches that have indication for the heading we are going and how much oxygen is left. So something that you really need if you are somewhere where you are depending on some form of life support. How long will this life support still give you, well, life support? And where are you going in an area which might be not very suited for your sensory organs and therefore very fast confusing. As we see here, we have the oxygen to carbon dioxide relation in the life support system of our suit displayed. At the moment, we see O2 is at the max, CO2 is on the minimum. In the center of the display, we see the planet we are currently standing on, with its name, Crete, in this case. The interesting problem that arises when you are traveling between different planets is that time measurements as we know it doesn't make any sense, as days and years are dependent on the rotation of the planet itself and how fast said planet is traveling around its star or stars in multiple star systems, which differs greatly from planet to planet. Our system of counting days completely goes out of the window if you have multiple stars in the system that aren't clumped together yet. So if one side of the planet turns away from its star, it might just turn towards the light of the second star of the system. So the night is maybe just 30 minutes and then you are towards another star that is maybe farther away, so you have a day that is hotter and a day that is colder, but still you have two daytimes more or less. So this black and white separation of the planet display tells us the local time of the day, as the only important thing to know is the divide between night and day and how long we have to the next night phase or day phase. So far I couldn't make out whether temperatures will have an impact on us, in which case the time of day could make the difference between life and death, as the temperature difference between night and day can be pretty substantial on some planets. I wouldn't be surprised if temperature would have an impact on us, as it does in nearly all space games that have a dirt side component, as for example Elite Dangerous or No Man's Sky. Even on the sci-fi RPG side of things, it occasionally gets important, as for example in the Mass Effect franchise. Maybe the display for temperature will only appear when it starts to have an impact on us, to not clutter the UI when not needed, maybe comparable to the radiation counter in Fallout 4 when outside of the power armor. On the right side we have the health bar, the equipped weapon, with the load in the gun and how much ammunition we carry around us for the equipped gun. Directly beneath that, next to it we have the equipped throwable ordnance and how many of which we have on hand, which exactly is the kind of incremental improvement I was speaking about. The combination itself is pretty standard, but telling me which type of grenade is equipped at the moment will improve, if not save, the life of my character in Starfield. The times I accidentally blew up myself in Fallout 4 because I thought I had equipped a mine, but then threw a frag grenade directly in front of my feet. Yikes. Yeah. Different thing that is quite notable is we don't have the radar compass band on the top center of the UI like in Fallout or Elder Scrolls. Which is something unusual for the standard Bethesda UI. But all of that will now be displayed on our watch on the bottom left. This small dot here is our compass needle and shows to the relative north on this planet or moon or whatever. Enemies and notable locations will also be displayed on this outer ring here, but we'll see that later in some other screenshots. Besides all the UI things, we see here our robot companion, probably also our first companion. Again, pretty industrial in its design, the whole NASA punk thing again. Maybe not the most elegant robot that was ever designed for a Bethesda game, but one very fitting to the general design philosophy in my opinion. A bit more in the background, we have some pretty alien looking vegetation. I'm rather curious on how much variety we will see in flora and fauna on the roughly 1,000 planets and moons we will be able to land on. In Elite Dangerous we see the same assets dropped no matter where we are in the galaxy, which in my opinion completely defeats the aim of getting you a feeling for the vastness of space, which is something the designers of Elite Dangerous have said. They want to portray that, how big, how mind-bogglingly big the universe is, and then no matter whether you are in the solar system or hundreds and thousands of light years away, you will meet more or less the same types of vegetation there, and yeah, that really defeats the whole purpose in my eyes. But yeah, it's generally a thing I have to grapple with in Early Dangerous, that there is not much variety. You don't see it visually that you are somewhere else than in the solar system. It's very much of the same more and more again. No Man's Sky does that much better, as it scrambles assets and as building blocks into different looking plants and animals on different planets. Though you often come across very similar looking creatures, and whilst there is something like convergent evolution in which you completely unrelated animals look pretty much alike because they inhabit the same niche in two separate ecosystems. Good example would be the very striking similarities between ichthyosaurs and modern dolphins, though they are separated by millions of years, and one is a reptilian and the other is a mammal. Yeah, but still I think the system in No Man's Sky, it does its job. but it still is a bit repetitive. Um, but yeah, it does its job. I don't want to complain. It's a very difficult task, and it will be very interesting how Bethesda is going to tackle it. It also isn't that clear to me. I've got mixed signals here from Bethesda. On the one side, it might be that they have uh, handcrafted animals, but it also could be that they also procedurally generate them, because it also already is confirmed that the planets will be procedural generated. No surprise here, with 1,000 planets, you can't do them all by hand. Yeah, so I'm very excited about what we will see on the animal front and how this will play out into the game um, on that side. And it still could be, there could still be an in-game explanation of why we have on several different planets the same animals we see, if they are handcrafted and just relying on some animals, because wherever humans go, we have a tendency to bring animals with us, voluntarily or involuntarily, with dogs and cats on one side. If you look into Australia, for example, dogs and cats were animals we brought with us because we saw a use in it. Some of them got loose and wreaked havoc in the ecosystem there and had to be reined in. Others weren't that voluntarily. For example, rats. They weren't indigenous to Australia, but they just came with humans. So that could be an explanation if you go by that. It is how they explain it in the Outer Birds. So while there is the same kind of animal on different planets, it's okay. Humans either have imported them or have brought them from one to the other planet, which also could be a good solution in my eyes. But I trust Bethesda there. They what I've seen so far from the design choices, I'm not disappointed, and it's very thought out and very much in universe. So I would guess we will see things that are at least just doing the job in a good compromise. In the backdrop, we have this beautiful mountain and mist scenery, which gives me all the ambience I really miss in the dangerous No Man's Sky. And just saying the entire surface of these planets are open to us. There is no map border. The mountain peak there in the distance, if you want to, you can go there. There probably isn't much to explore there, besides maybe a very majestic view, but you could go there if you want to. But before I diverge too much into how planets and such work, which is a thing for a different video, let's move on to the next screenshot. Here we now see something that's genuinely new to Bethesda games, but reminds me somewhat of the scan modes we already know from No Man's Sky or Mass Effect Andromeda. We can start with the UI on the left. From top to bottom, we have the name of the ball of dirt with which we currently desecrate our Void Noble's feet. Directly beneath, we have traits on which I couldn't find any further information in the trailer. But I could imagine that it entails things like unusual weather, high radiation, etc. Again, something we know from No Man's Sky and other space games. Beneath that, we get some information on how much we've scanned already the planet and its features, which is a bit like in No Man's Sky again, and pretty self-explanatory. As we see here, there are only 2 species of flora and no animals, so Crete isn't exactly bubbling with life, but has 8 types of resources. But we really cannot tell if that is particularly much or not. I'm a bit puzzled about what it means. We have scanned the current biome. Does that mean that we will have different biomes on every planet, which would make sense? But with 1,000 moons and planets that we will be able to land on, will mean quite some variety, but also quite some content that has to be made and tested by the developers. It could also just mean that we have scanned 50% of we need to scan for something in a biome that is a general classification of planets that have this biome, and then we, I don't know, get an achievement, unlock a skill, I don't know, could be that. I don't know what to make of it. to be honest. Beneath that, we have our watch again. The time of the day, name and class of the celestial bottle we are sitting on, but on the bottom of that, we see now the temperature, which I presume is in degrees Celsius, as all the rest of the units are here also in metric, and NASA is also using the metric system, so it would give an American audience this space-like feeling to it, and that's something I've seen on many occasions in the design choice for Starfield, that they try really much to get the flavor of modern day spacefaring and put it into this game in the mid-distant future. Next to it, we have the O2 level of the atmosphere, which is with 1% a bit lower than I would feel comfortable taking off my helmet. I think it's around 19% on Earth, but please don't quote me on that. But as you see next to it, the moon has only half of Earth's gravity, which is sensible for a moon. But it also means a thin atmosphere and much fun while jumping. So yeah, we also see here the radar, the marker of a relevant location on it, and the marker on screen a bit to the right where it is in-game. On the bottom, we see besides the button for scanning, also a photo mode, which is a very nice addition, nothing surprising, but again a nice evolution. Nearly all of the modern games have now a photo mode, which is very nice to share your character and let others see what you've done there. It's a nice feature, and but right next to it, we have the button for founding an outpost with the counter that says 30. And we see that the counter again at another point where we get to see the scanner menu. We will see that in the part where we will be talking about outposts and the gathering of resources, and if we may have even some form of economy. So we will see that later on. I see three possibilities on what this counter means. On the one side, it could mean that we have a limited number of resources we can carry with us to build these outposts. It's max at 30. We can't carry around more than 30 outpost founding kits around us. The other two are either it's a hard cap for 30 outposts on this planet or a hard cap in general. So we won't be able to found more than 30 outposts in the entire game. Which sounds at first glance a bit limiting, as there will be 1,000 planets to land on. But on the other side, if you compare it to the other Bethesda games we had so far, I don't know whether we already had anywhere 30 outposts we could have, like settlements in Fallout 4 and player homes / countryside manors in Skyrim. So it is much more, and we also have to see how often will I travel between 30 outposts that are scattered around 1,000 planets. How often will I do that and still have fun in the game? I don't think very often. Also, let's not forget, this is a role-playing game. It's not a space sim. It's not like No Man's Sky, where gathering resources and doing that for everything is a core point of the game. You won't need that many outposts probably to progress in the game, and if it is anything like in Fallout 4, we probably could get away with never building more than one outpost. Like probably you have one mission where you have to build one to learn the ropes of it, but not more. So just remind ourselves of the genre we are looking at. Even though it very much looks like a space sim, it is a role-playing game at its heart. So I think 30 outposts, even if this is the hard capacity, will be enough for what we will be doing in this game. We also see a button to toggle a guide. I suspect that you can turn off some form of tutorials with that, which sounds pretty convenient to me, as you aren't harassed by them if you don't want it, but you can turn them on again if with little inconvenience when returning after a long absence to the game. It is part of a newer approach to tutorials in general in different games. I've seen in the development diaries to Victoria 3 by Paradox Interactive that they also try to approach tutorials from a more fun point. That's not something you skip over, but it's more an integral part of the game that gives you more, well, takes you on the hand and leads you a bit on without being too infantilizing. In the center, we see some rocks being scanned and identified as iron. I like the little tag next to it. It has this very sciencey like look to it, like at the table of periods. All the resources are color coded, and I like the color they chose for iron, as a rusty red on the surface of a planet can be a good indicator for iron on the planet. As you see here also on the floor, I would suspect this is also some form of iron trace on the planet's surface. It also, fun fact on the side, is the reason why Mars is red brownish, because it's basically covered in rust dust. At this picture we see a mining tool. This is how we will mine resources by hand, and obviously we will be able to automate this on a bigger level with the outposts. And also very interesting, we see on the bottom right that this mining tool needs some form of fuel or ammunition. And I find this a very good design choice to give you always this form of, well, I need resources for that, I need to plan ahead, I need to think about I do something, which is something, the amount of pre-thought for every little thing in spaceflight is immense, and the caution and how much time some things take or how much effort. For example, if two spaceships dock at present day in our universe, they test whether it is really sealed, if they really have a sealed lock between these two hatches for 2 hours or something like that before they open the hatch. So you already arrived in your capsule at the International Space Station and still waiting for 2 hours until the flight engineer on your side and the team on the other side in the space station have checked whether this seal really is close to not risk anything. And I like this approach here, that you always have to come prepared. It's not like, oh well, I go from Sanctuary away and I will find my way. Somehow I will find the things I need on the wayside. It's not that big of a problem. I can make my life more interesting with that, but I don't need to plan it before. And the same is true for Skyrim. But here, we will have to keep that in mind. We will have to keep resources and ammunition at hand if we want to do anything, and I like that because it gives this feeling of you have to come prepared. Spaceflight is fantastic and it's an adventure, but it also comes with risks and you need to plan ahead. To find the right middle ground between, you have to plan ahead and gather resources and manage your resources cleverly on the one side and not overdo it on the other side, not to need for everything a resource. It's like you have in No Man's Sky where you want to approach a task and you have to gather resources and refine them for an hour or two until you can actually do what you want to do. But again, it's a different game. They have an emphasis more on gathering resources and base building, whilst this game will more have a focus on the story and the world around and how you interact with this world, and less so on resources and such. At least that's what I see here, and I would say it more goes into the direction of how Elite Dangerous approaches things with fuel for your ship and ammunition and consumable items you need to have to survive in space. As we commence in the trailer, the player character approaches and sneaks into an abandoned outpost that clearly has a slight problem with some trespassers from the Crimson Fleet pirate gang. I just wanted to show you this because I think the lighting and the whole ambience in this picture is such an improvement on what we're used to from Fallout 4, and gives a really good feeling. I like it very much. But again, when we look back, Fallout 4 came out in 2015, so it's now 7 years old. Will be 7.5 years when Starfield is going to be released, probably when they can hold the Q1 2023 target they have set themselves and communicated. With such massive games, it always is a bit of a risk. There always can come delays. We don't know what the pandemic will do in autumn and winter, so maybe there will come new delays in there, maybe not. And I personally also prefer that if they have the feeling they aren't where they want to be for the release date, there are some serious problems still in game, let's move it back for a quarter, maybe even two, so we are in Q2 or 3 in 2023 to release it, but then it's ready. I would prefer that, other than what they did at CD Projekt Red when they released Cyberpunk 2077, which was in the first 3 months at often just unplayable with game-breaking bugs. And Bethesda games are very buggy in the beginning, but it's just because these games are so big. It just comes with nature. We have to expect that. If we expect something different when such a game comes out, we will be disappointed. So be prepared. You will get Starfield in the beginning with some bugs, but as long as they are not game breaking and you can play the game, I think it's still okay. And as we see now, Skyrim and Fallout 4 by now are pretty bugless as far as such a complex game can be. There are some minor problems, but any game has them. So yeah, I hope they can hold the Q1 2023 area for release. But yeah, moving on. While we shoot our way through the abandoned outpost, we can see the weapons equipment quick select menu. Nothing new to Bethesda players, but again, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. A pistol on the top, an assault rifle on the left, a shotgun on the right, and the mining tool we just saw on the bottom. So far, so good. Also interesting, here we see a red dot on our radar, clearly indicating the pirate that is waiting on the top end of the staircase to catch some shotgun rounds from us. We also see a white number on a red ground, which is displaying the level of our opponent. I think the decision to show us what level our opponents have will help us to assess the risk of an engagement better, helps us to use the right approach or even avoid the confrontation altogether. In Fallout 4, we already had that if some creature was very much above our level and was a huge threat, we had this small skull next to its name, but yeah, it was not very transparent. The whole system sounds pretty valuable especially for new players, but in general. But also would very much be of help if we had these procedural generated animals, because if you have animals that are never the same, you cannot learn, oh, this is Deathclaw, I have to watch out, I have to use the big guns, or well, this is just a red roach, I can stomp them in the ground with basically nothing. So we won't have that if we have these procedural generated elements. We will never be used to them, and if they are different from planet to planet, even more so. So we would need something like this to help us to identify which is a threat, which is not a threat, and go forward with that. What is notable on this screenshot too is what we see on our watch besides the red dot on our radar. Now, more of the moon creed is dark, so we're experiencing a local night, which is hard to tell as we're inside a dark building with no windows as far as we can tell. But also, our O2 level is slightly depleted. But just a few moments later, we can see that the O2 is back up. And when I first looked through these screenshots, I thought this is like in many space games where you have a finite amount of oxygen in your tank, in your suit, so you have to replenish that from time to time. But then I watched the trailer again and again and compared the scenes to each other and saw it's something even better. It is our stamina bar, which I find is a really immersive way to represent the value and binds it into the game world. So if we run, the system in our spacesuit isn't used to that. So we are using up more oxygen than the system is used to, and so we are depleting the oxygen level inside of our system. If we rest, it can recover and give us enough breathing air again, which I think is a nice way to approach that. And you can explain arrays of stamina very well through upgrades to your suit. It also means that the spacesuit in Starfield have air scrubbers, a technology that uses electricity and some form of chemicals sometimes to keep a limited amount of air breathable for a more or less, emphasis on less, indefinite time period, as long as you have electricity on your hand, which is a technique that is currently used by military submarines and all crewed spacecraft. So again, a very nice use of existing concepts from our current spacefaring technology in the game. There are some other interesting things in the screenshot to discover. First is this sketch of a hexapod creature that doesn't look really like something I would want to meet in a dark alleyway, but it looks unfinished. So either just unfinished to create some air of, well, this was abandoned very hastily and somebody was just drawing it and had to abandon it, or it is done on purpose, which would be a hint to me for these procedure generated creatures, whilst only including the parts of the creature that are common enough or even a condition for certain circumstances in this creation process, in this randomization process, to appear in these creatures. So it always fits to an extent. The other thing is how interesting objects are indicated to us through this very heads-up display-like marker, which I feel like nice looking. It just fits the whole setting of the game. And we already can see this weapon case is locked, but we are quite lucky. It is only on a novice level, so it shouldn't be any problem for us to open it. And with that, we get a glimpse at the new lockpicking mechanic. Digipicks are now the consumable item we need for lockpicking, so leave your hairpins in the wastelands of the Commonwealth, you won't need them here. And we need to turn the outer ring with these two knobs until they fit into these gaps. What is new is that we have these different keys that have two knobs at different positions, so we have to recognize which one we need in for which level. So if we would have chosen one of the other ones, it wouldn't have fit, we would have failed this lockpicking attempt and would have to start over and use a new digipick. And this is how that looks in action. I could imagine this system is quite fun. I also like that how this box now opens and we see the item lying in it. It's not like we open this menu and just pick them over. But I think Bethesda always had a nice way of handling items in the world and have a positive way of cluttering the world with small items that are in various levels of usefulness to you. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to on-foot gameplay is technically not even on foot, but see for yourself. This is something I'm really excited about. We see here a fight in low to zero G environment, so either aboard a space station or a ship respectively in the cargo hold of one. Obviously, we will get some system of maneuvering in these kinds of environments. I would guess it's not unlike when we get into a lake or river in Skyrim or Fallout 4 and switch into a swimming, diving mode. We have to appreciate this is something, to my knowledge, we haven't seen in any other form of space game in which you control a small character. And it makes level design and many physics things in creating the game much more difficult. And so just to appreciate the ambition Bethesda has here with this game, I can't wait to have fights in ZOG. It just looks like amazing fun. The question also is, will all ships and stations in space have low to zero G environments, or will we just walk around in our ships like in Star Trek or Star Wars as artificial gravity? Something we have no clue about how this would work. On the other hand, it's something we are used to. We know this is up, this is down, but in space it can be just, okay, up and down is just your opinion, mate. I would love to see that. I really would. It would lend itself more to the whole we are in space. This is very much like on the ISS in many regards, but in a mid-distant future. It also would make much more sense this trade we've seen in the last video that speaks about the acclimatization to space, and that wouldn't make that much sense if we would have artificial gravity in the spaceship, but if we don't have, it makes very much sense. There are these funny clips of astronauts who have forgotten how gravity works, and they just let a pen mid-sentence, they just open their grip on it, and because they were just so used to that it would just float in front of them, they are a bit puzzled that suddenly it fell down and are a bit confused where this pen has gone, and then remember, oh yeah, we are back on gravity. That's it. So I would love to see that, but this is more a topic for the next video, in which we discuss space gameplay, and I will show you there one or two other reasons why I think we will be floating quite often in luxurious low to zero G conditions. If you don't want to miss any of my videos of this breakdown, please subscribe and don't forget to ring the bell. If you really want to make my day, then give me a thumbs up on top of it. And with that, I wish you a really nice day, and see you, Space Cowboy.